be interesting is to have high school seniors address an envelope.
Ms. Williams, can you hear us?
I can hear you guys. Can you hear me?
Yep, thank you. We'll start
Thank you.
with 2 minutes here.
Perfect. Thanks.
We are live streaming right now. So. Hi, John. Good. We're going to get started here in about a minute. Okay. All right, I've got 5:30 p.m. here. We'll call to order this board workshop, August 30th, 2023, 5:30 p.m. Ashley, if you can call a roll, please.
Runner,
Here.
Walstad,
Here.
Williams,
Here.
Wheeler. Here. Swint,
Here.
Casper. Judd.
Here, we do have a quorum, so we will proceed. Item number 3 would be consideration of adopting the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved to adopt the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Ashley, go ahead and call the roll now, please.
Walstad,
Yes.
Williams,
Aye.
Wheeler. Aye. Swint,
Aye.
Casper. Runner,
Aye.
Judd.
Aye, motion carries. All right, just a couple preliminary comments here before I turn it over to Mr. Clausen this evening. Discussion this evening will be centered around information and discussion related to the district potentially going out for a bond referendum. Some of the goals and objectives that I'm hoping for out of the meeting today is to try to work towards establishing a consensus on certain items. One being how many dollars the board is comfortable pledging towards a potential project. 2, what a potential project or referendum might look like. Is that 1 school? Is that 2 schools? Is that 2 schools with deferred maintenance? Other ideas. Mr. Clausen is going to largely walk through a presentation that addresses a number of questions that have been submitted to administration by board members related to facilities. And then if there are additional questions that are developed throughout this meeting, we'll compile those questions. If we're able to answer them today, obviously we'll do so. But if we have additional questions that we're unable to answer today, or we need to bring in folks for another workshop in the future, we'll do that as well. And then hoping to establish some sort of timeline of when the board might be comfortable acting on formal action related to calling for an election, or what additional information board members might need to get comfortable to get to that point to make a decision on that. So with that, I think I will turn it over to you, Mr. Clausen, to begin walking through the presentation. This is very informal. There's no motions that will be made today with it being a board workshop. So if you have questions or comments or anything like that, and as Mr. Clausen is going through the information, feel free to raise your hand or interrupt, and we'll try and address those questions as best we can. So Mr. Clausen, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, President John. Okay, let's go ahead and get ourselves started. Some of the questions that we were posed, I will read them and we'll discuss our answer. The very first one is, how many K-4 students are currently in portables? Well, first of all, we have 2,270 K-4 students in portables, which, excuse me, we have 2,270 students altogether K-4. And within the portables, we have 1,420 students.
Can we get to the next slide, Mr. Clausen? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I apologize.
There we go. Thank you.
There. So that'll make sense, a little more sense for you guys. So once again, we have 1,420 students in our portables, which leaves us at 63% of our students, K-4 students, in portables. That is a very large percent. And a little bit earlier, I was talking with President Jones about some of the situations we have with portables. And since I know Rickard a little bit, that's the one that I'll focus on. Is that we have 2 portables at Rickard, and We have music and we have our reading strategist in the other portable. And so we have kids all day going to music, so they're used all the time, every day. And with the student population at Ricker, we probably have about 50 kids going to see the reading strategist, get interventions. So they are definitely used all day long. So any questions on that one?
This will probably be addressed later on, but just based on the packet. Which buildings has the portables that need the most help? For the longest time, it was Wilkinson that needed the most work on their portables. Then it was Lewis and Clark, then it went back to Wilkinson. Is there one building that has a higher need when it comes to the portables from a maintenance standpoint than others?
I would still agree with Wilkinson because when it's raining outside,
Yeah.
It's pretty much raining inside.
Yep.
And so they're
Okay.
probably the oldest and most
Yeah.
dilapidated.
Well, are they, I thought Lewis and Clark's were the oldest on the calendar for how long they've been placed. I could be wrong.
I think we could sum it up as a long time.
They're both from the 80s. So, and whoever's older is probably only a difference of a year or two, I think.
I've heard of conversations around town that Lewis and Clark's were probably in the 70s, and Wilkinson was in the 80s. That's what
And I've heard that too, but I don't have anything that says that's the truth, so I don't want to assume. But I know Wilkinson's are from the 80s.
We've got a slide here a little bit later on this. stuff.
Okay, I had a feeling we might address that, so that's why I said I apologize for jumping ahead.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's okay. And we do have a picture of portable Wilkinson.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's a fair statement to make that regardless of what sort of scope the board chooses, whether that's one school, two schools, even with two 600-seat elementaries, it's obvious by the numbers here that there's gonna have to be some sort of phase-out approach on the modulars. You're never gonna be able to get rid of them all day long. It's just not feasible.
And the ones that are the newest are the ones that make that, correct? All right.
No, just pertaining to the portables at Lewis and Clark and Wilkinson, when we were doing building grounds meetings previously and discussing possibly moving modulars around, those have all outlived their life by, the average lifespan was what, 27 years for a,
Yeah, roughly.
I have to look back at what the data was, but they're all well beyond their life.
Oh, yeah, by a couple of decades.
And I think when you talk need of who would be first, they're both in the same boat.
Got it. And that was my,
Heating issues and walls coming off, snow getting in.
Right to the ones. You walk in there, you can actually see the slope.
None of them have restrooms. None of them have drinking fountains in them. None of them have any type of facilities in those two buildings.
Okay, let's go on to our next one. Our goal is to move to a K-5 grade configuration. Can it be done with one 600-student elementary school, or would we need two to accomplish this? Well, I think looking back and referring back to the number of kids that are in the portables, which is 1,420, I think that pretty much identifies what we're going to be needing. And we know that our student body is going to fluctuate. So we know that we're still going to be dealing with about the same amount of portables and the same amount of students in portables. So you're going to be dealing with anywhere from 50 to 60% of the portables. So I would say you're looking at needing two schools for sure to get all kids on.
If we had 25 kids in the class at that number, that would be 57 classes. And we know that that number is probably gonna fluctuate
Right.
between now and when something is open, open door.
Sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
I guess, what would be the priority though? Would it be getting rid of the modulars or getting the kids back into, the fifth graders back in elementary schools? Because it doesn't seem like you'd be able to do both of them. You know, I don't know how many fifth graders there are. Well, it'd be like 400, I suppose. So maybe
Yeah, you'd be close.
it's, I'm just curious if you would, if the priority would be getting them back in there, or would it be getting rid of as many modulars as you can? You guys had that conversation.
We never really went down that path. But I would think that if we have the 600 student buildings, you would be able to continue to use what we have, the brick and mortar that we have, and make that happen.
That's what we were thinking about doing 3 years ago, is if we got 2 schools for 600, then we could stop using the portables for general ed class purposes and get kids back into brick and mortar.
Yeah, and I honestly think, if this all comes to fruition, I don't know if you're gonna be able to take all the portables out at once. I mean, I think you're gonna have to stage it. And I guess time will tell.
To me, the priority absolutely is to get fifth grade back at the elementary. I haven't run across one person in town that doesn't think getting fifth grade back at the elementary level is the wrong idea. A lot of people feel that they still need recess. I think there's a major difference between maturity levels when you've got fifth graders at Central Campus instead of sixth and seventh, even though we've got them, separated as best we can right now. I think absolutely priority is got to be to get fifth grade back in the elementary buildings. And I think there's overwhelming support for that priority across the community.
I would agree with that statement 100%.
And I think they're still in the stage.
I really think, that's very, very important. Maybe number one on the list is getting fifth grade back into the elementary.
I think that they're still at the age where they need some guidance, and I think a self-contained classroom can help provide that guidance and mentor them in regards to being organized, how to treat others, and they can set the example for all the other kids. They can be leaders, and I think it's just advantageous all the way around.
I think back to when my daughters were in fifth grade, and yeah, they're still kids in most cases, and they still need to be treated as kids. And then when they're in sixth grade, now they're starting to bridge that gap between a kid and a teen. I've actually seen numerous children start sixth grade where they're still more childlike, but then by the end of that school year, they're ready to move into that teen stage.
And board members, if you're using an electronic device, those links will bring you to other Google documents if you're looking for additional information or RSP information. And I believe it's in your packet here as well.
I didn't get one of those. I've got this one, but I didn't want this.
Okay, how will the administration hire staff for one elementary school or two elementary schools? Would it be simply transferring teachers from portables to the new schools, or do you anticipate having to hire more teachers? Well, I hate to give away what's coming up later, but you are obviously going to be taking those teachers that are in the portables and putting it into the brick and mortar classrooms. But we're continually having to hire teachers. That's just how things go. We're always going to be trying to fill the needs we do have. And I I guess, positions open up for various reasons. So I would say we would be looking at doing both.
Sense.
Would you say in general this year, Mr. Clausen, that the elementary schools that are doing relatively well in comparative to maybe Central Campus or the high school and having those teaching positions filled? I know that we toured McVeigh, and I think Mrs. Ryder indicated that she had all of her teaching spots filled. Some of them maybe have some long-term subs, but the elementary is faring maybe a little bit better in terms of filling those teaching positions. Would that be accurate?
Yes, you're absolutely accurate. We still need a couple reading strategists. I know we need a counselor at an elementary. But entirely, yes, I think we need to have ourselves well equipped in the K-4 schools versus in the high school. I know we're looking for some math teachers. And like I say, the Central Campus is definitely for more teachers.
Any questions or comments on this one here?
Chris, or I just wanted to say, I also agree with trying to move the 5th grade back to the elementary school. Ever since I've been on the board, I think that's been something the community has been really positive about. And I think if we're going to be looking at building and doing these additions or removals, that's something we just need to build in. So I appreciate everyone talking about that as also something we need to be discussing, because it's very important, I think, to those younger parents that have kids, that you can kind of get to the next few years for them to know that their younger student will be in an elementary setting when they reach 5th grade.
Thank you, Ms. Williams.
Okay, moving right along. The district uses existing construction documents it currently owns, or will we be looking to come up with a new school model? I believe we have quite a few renderings that I think that we should be using. We've already paid for them, we own them, and I think they're very viable resources for us, and so I don't know why we wouldn't use them.
My only concern with this one was where was with Missouri Ridge. I like that school a lot. I think a lot of people do, but there's not enough and maybe I'm misunderstanding something. I don't think there's enough classrooms to have 4 sections per grade with that. So would we, if we're going to use that model, or is that just showing us what we have?
I think, if I remember, I know I can think of like 2 or 3 already, the elementary schools that have been generated since I've been here. And like say, for an example, Missouri Ridge, that is a beautiful school. And we could use the renderings, but make some type of modification of it.
That's a question I had posed, Kyle, and I think that's why the Missouri Ridge plan is attached here for informational purposes. I like the design as well. I've heard a lot of positive feedback in the community regarding, the layout of that. But that is a decision that I think the board's going to have to make. Is that's a 450-ish seat building. And the question I posed to Dr. Fadley is how easily could that design be adjusted or tweaked to turn that into a 600-seat plan. Certainly, there would be some involved costs to do that relative to some of these other renderings that are through 100%, I think, through the design phase where they're pretty much ready, I think, outside of maybe checking this to make sure there hasn't been any code changes or anything like that. But,
Yeah, I would say so, because they were both designed for 600 feet. One of them was designed to possibly replace Wilkinson many years ago. And yeah, those are already set up for 600 seats, but possibly take some things away from them. There's some aspects of them that I think are a little grandiose, but that's just my opinion.
My other question is like, so you gave us 2 renderings. The one actually had, Missouri Ridge has 2 gyms. Sorry. And the other rendering didn't, have 1 gym. So my question is, do we want 2 gyms in elementary schools, or do we want 1?
I was just gonna talk about that. Missouri Ridge is a beautiful school. I think you would want approximately 10 more classrooms added on to that to get to the 600. But the 2 gyms is where it's at. You have opportunities to get a FIAD throughout the course of the day. Where like if you have 1 gym and use that for like a multi-purpose room, your schedule is so confined, and with the 2 gyms, it's gonna open it up. And when you have those opportunities, this is gonna be another, I guess, a caveat, having the 2 gyms. You're gonna be able to host some practices after school for the high school kids, the junior high kids, so they're not practicing in the morning. And I think that would be advantageous because I'm sure they have to make sure everybody has that morning practice, and I think it would help with that. And one other aspect of Missouri Ridge, I think that you'd have to take a look at is the commons area, because I don't know if that would be able to serve enough kids.
I know, I remember when that was built, and it was, the commons area was built for 4 kids.
And so that would have that interest. But the one thing I really do like too is they have the 2 different playgrounds, one for the smaller kids and one for the older kids. I guess as an elementary principal and an ex-teacher, that is awesome. Because then you can have recesses for both of them going on at the same time and not worry about a 5th grader throwing a football and hitting a kindergartner in the head. So those are all things that are advantageous.
Concern I have is that I want to know what our budget is. In other words, I don't want us to say, we need 2 schools, total cost is $100 million. And, gosh, we can only come up with $80 million. Now we've got to work backwards. I think it's important for us to say, this is our budget, this is what we need, and enforce our architects and designers to work within the confines and the constrictions of our budget. So I think there's a delicate balance there. I've been through this before. It's easy to say, yeah, we want all bells and whistles, and then they come back with a price tag and go, now you're working backwards. So we have to say, this is our budget, this is what we have to work with. You guys make it happen. That's what we do.
That. Been down that road many times.
So I think the Missouri Ridge floor plan, I've got some notes written here. I think that's the question and item to bring back probably to our next workshop for some further explanation and information presented on that. That's fair with everybody.
And I agree with that school. I've been in that building many, many, many times, and that is a very, very nice building. And it could potentially be, an architect could potentially add on to it, making it a larger capacity. Maybe a bigger footprint, of course, but I think that might be the way to go.
I'm also not opposed to the other one.
The one that was potentially going to replace Wilkinson is a very, very nice building. It really is a really nice building. There's just some aspects of it that I think are a little bit glamorized.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think I've heard a lot of comments from the community over the years when they walk into Missouri Ridge, they feel like that's what a school should look like.
Exactly.
But it's pretty basic.
Yeah. And when you have, so from my perspective, when you have a palette that is more simplified, it allows for the people within that space to make it their own without interfering with something else that might be there. So, like they do in Missouri Ridge, as the school year progresses, the students are hanging up their art. It's much more visible. They are putting individualized pieces in that building that relate to that student family. When you have other things that are visually taken away from that, you kind of lose the balance. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So,
I've always thought of it as I think the schools need to be functional, they don't need to be fancy. And when we're asking, the taxpayers to support a referendum, I think we always need to have that in the back of our minds. Yes, the schools need to look nice, but they need to be functional and they need to be as cost efficient and as effective as we can.
Okay, moving right along. If we bond for 2 elementary schools, this will put the district very close to its debt limit. Do you anticipate any future projects that would require debt, such as remodels or expansions or other new schools having to be built in the next 10 years? Yes, yes, and yes. As we know, with the elementary kids, they're going to continue to progress through the grades, so they're eventually going to get to the middle school and the high school. So you're always going to have that concern. Do you have enough room? Can you accommodate those kiddos in the buildings you do have? And we also have RSP that has given us some data too that we can refer back to, and it does have us increasing in size. So, and they've been pretty close to accurate so far. And then we also have deferred maintenance that we need to keep in mind with some of our other buildings.
Awesome about the middle question. I'm sorry, the middle question there. Plan for communicating with the public.
Okay, I'm just trying to get us out of here. So do we want to just go ahead and address the one that I just talked about, and then we'll go back to that one?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Any questions or comments from the board on that?
I just wanted to go back kind of segueing this with this one too, but kind of back to that 2 gym conversation. If we do end up going with the renderings that have already been kind of pre-approved, already all that kind of stuff, is there any research or anything that shows how we're splitting up that school? I mean, I know we're going to have wings of like 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade kind of thing, but if there's only one gym, how are those kids separated and how are they sharing that and all of that stuff? Because I mean, that's definitely a great question, and something I've thought about is the 2 gym thing. And I know we're talking about having to redo some things, but I don't see how you can function with only one gym in a 600 seat elementary school myself. So I feel like that's another, it kind of segues to this question, is that's already something we're probably going to have to add on if we don't do it right away. Is that how everyone else is kind of thinking like this?
I am. I know that with the other renderings, because I was with the committee when those were created, the building was set up into pods. So you had one section that was going to be just 1st grade, and then there was a common area, and then another section that was just 2nd grade with a common area. And the common area could be used for multidisciplinary use for just about anything and everything. But there was only one gym. And it was a larger gym, but it was still only one gym, and that was always an issue. Because if you have half the school having lunch, well, the other half of the school could be using another gym, especially if it's a raining day or a snowy day or too cold outside where it's not safe.
Yeah, no, I agree. I guess, like I said, this kind of went into the both questions, because if we're building too small, or too not accommodating to what our students need, to me, that's answering the second question of always a yes, because we're always building not completely to what we need. So I guess, Chairman Junt, you're saying we need to come back to this because we don't know how much this would add to the already estimated cost. Is that what you're thinking?
I think there's a couple factors in play here. One, what are the architect and engineering costs to modify the Missouri Bridge plan from 450 to 600? Because that's going to be an incremental cost relative to the design renderings that already exist that are essentially 100% through the design and development phase. However, if those existing renderings that are 100% through only contain one gym, and the board is looking at what the cost is and having to modify those plans, you're probably looking at additional architect costs anyway on those plans as well, so.
I'm guessing we're probably around $400 a square foot construction, is anybody know?
There's some numbers later on, I think about 417 or 418 was what I calculated. Mr. Smith?
One of the things that I'm really concerned about through this process, and I know we as a board, obviously, our big main goal is to focus on what is this gonna look like budgetarily. I'm really focused too on how our decisions and what we present to the public are gonna impact the educational environment. And what kind of input will we be seeking from our administrative team, our educators, with these plans and a final layout of what's gonna work for them that would still be within a budget that we as a board can set. We're gonna look at the numbers and dollars and a lot of that. I'm concerned that we're giving them the building that's gonna work at the same time within their needs, and that their input into this is far exceeds ours as a board, because we're not in the environment on a daily basis. And I know we can say two gyms and we can talk back and forth about it. But hearing from them is extremely important to me when we do select the final drawings and fit it in the budget. Budget's important, and they know that. But my concerns are that we do hear from them in what they think will work as well.
That's a great segue into the next question, actually. What is the best plan for communicating your need and plans to the public and just adding the people that are employed?
Surveys. We've had successful surveys in the past. I mean, especially if they're a detailed survey.
I think one of the things I would like to see is an actual question on gym space, because I completely understand what Director Swinton means. Like, I'm not trying to make this a vanity thing or just for spacing or anything like that. This is my idea, and I should have maybe said this earlier, is, we really are low on gym space in our community. And, just from being a coach for a travel basketball team, we were willing to pay money to rent spaces out to practice, even after the Coyotes had practiced. And there just isn't that type of space sometimes available with all the bazaars and everything going on. So, it's not just so much what the school needs, but it's the community and what they're needing, because they're actually the ones going to be paying this, right? I mean, we are too, but the community. And so gym spaces, like, I like Mr. Clausen, what you were talking about is like, these can be used for a lot of different things. And, yes, like Heather was saying, yes, during lunch, during all those periods during school hours, it's very important to have that space. But again, the community that's paying for this building can actually utilize these gyms after hours. And for me, that's really important to hear from them, as a question maybe on that survey is extra gym space needed in this community. We've talked about this for soccer fields. We've talked about this for hockey. We've talked about this for a lot of different things. So why not just ask the community while we're getting their input if this is actually something we're looking at doing? Because if we're adding and changing our plans and adding money onto this cost or process, we need to explain why. And to me, that's saying this is why.
That's actually a really good point.
I feel more comfortable with the collaboration between educators and architects. Because the educators and architects are going to have a better idea of what the needs are for educating our students than we are as a board, unless we've got expertise in either one of those fields, I would just assume. But staying within the budget is where I'm at. I don't mind spending money, but stick with the budget.
Yes, and the community too, though. I mean, especially the parents of students, getting their input, because they're the ones who are going to be in the building as much as teachers are and admins are and district staff. So getting their input too. So parents have had some really great ideas. So let them express them.
Mrs. Ratzak?
When we did the renderings of the other school sites that we did, there were community members, staff, there was teachers, there were administrators, food services, everybody was considered in the conversation. So there were surveys sent out, there was conversations in the buildings. There was a lot of that at that time. When you guys talk about the two gyms, the one big thing you gotta remember, if there could be a lunchroom separate from the gyms, that makes the world of difference.
Oh, yeah, that solves the problem.
There would be over 3.5 hours more or 3 hours more in a day to a PE class in a school that size if you had a separate lunchroom from the gym. So that made a big difference. And I think when you're talking about that, because like right now, I know at Hagen, for example, that one gym, she does 10 classes a day. Well, 10 classes a day only gives them like 30 minutes twice a week. So it's like, that's 20 classrooms. So it's a lot to run through. But if she had that extra 3 hours, it wouldn't be just back to back to back to back. She could actually have some prep time or things like that. So having that separate space is really a big, big thing. So like that commons area out at Missouri Ridge would be, there's a lunchroom per se versus a gym.
I forgot about that. Thank you for bringing that up, because one of the renderings did have a lunchroom separate from the gym. And that lunchroom could be used as common space as well. And then the other teams that were involved were SPED. Wilmac was heavily involved in the plan creation, and being able to offer input, so.
I know like in the commons area, we are required to offer children water. And that's something that the architects would be able to accommodate that without us having to put a big cooler of water out there for the children. Not that you can't do that, but there's easier ways.
Is there any way to check with the architecture companies? Is it, I can't remember this, if it was the same company that did Missouri Ridge, that's kind of looking at doing, or did the District 1 renderings. But are we sure there wasn't other options given during those processes that had different gym options, different lunch/gym options, 600, 500? You know, I know that they chose 450 for Missouri Ridge, but was there any other options given?
Tyler, you can maybe speak to this, but I don't think Missouri Ridge was not initially 450. It went 450 after the addition, correct?
Yeah, so when it was originally built, they built the core space to handle 450 kids, but there was classrooms enough for 120 kids. And then they added on the wings to get the classroom space up to 450. But I don't know if there was other options. I don't know that, but that's how they built it.
And not even just at, thank you, Kyle, and not even just at Missouri Ridge. I mean, even District 1. I mean, that's what they settled on, was that final rendering for that elementary school with one gym. But what else was offered during their meetings? I mean, we've never been offered just one option. We usually we pick from option A through D or A through C. So is there any way to see what District 1 was offered other than the one they picked?
Look through back on those minutes from years back, because there was.
The options that would have been provided would have been very vague in what are we looking for a number of students. And then from there, once a decision was made to say we want 600 seats, then the design development phase would have began. So you're not going to have necessarily a rendering of, hey, here's what 500 would look like, here's what 450 would look like. It's ultimately came down to these are how many students we wanted to be able to serve at the schools. And so then they really got to the design development phase at that point. Does that answer your question, Sarah?
Yeah, no, that totally answers it. And I would like to see, even if there was 3 options of the 600 seat, you know what I mean? I would like to see all the options that District 1 was offered during those board minutes.
They wouldn't have been, sorry to interrupt you, they wouldn't have been to that phase like you're thinking. They wouldn't have been plans.
No.
So everybody would have kind of laid out, this is what we're looking for, and given that to the design firm. And then they would have built off of those options. So the 2 options for these 2 schools would have been site specific. And there wouldn't have been 5 options or 4 options. It would have been specific to this is your land that you have to cover. This is what you're wanting to do in this space. Then the design firm would have started from there. So there wouldn't have been 3 or 4 school options. It would have been specific to the 2 that were presented at that point
once there were plans laid out on what they wanted to house in those buildings.
That makes sense. Thank you.
I'll just make one more comment on the double gym. And when I think of all the opportunities that this would present for scheduling and so on, you would obviously need 2 Phi-Ed teachers, and if the schedule allowed and they finished their Phi-Ed through the day, they maybe have 1 period left at the end of the day or the middle of the day. And that's where we'd have the opportunity to use them for interventions for kids, or we could go with some of your STEM classes or STEM opportunities, or maybe even some gifted and talented. So you would have a certified teacher being able to present those classes to those students. So it's definitely advantageous.
Just one other thing I'd like to say with these plans, and they're great, and they're majority done, right? One thing is, how will they fit within our strategic plan for the district of District 7, and how can we alter them to fit? Because I think these are great plans. How are we going to make them fit what we're looking at for the future of District 7, not what was District 1 and what was District 8, but how can we now take these plans and make them ours, alter them to get to that, and make them financially sound for our district?
Balance.
Every architectural firm has a shit of fun. They got a lot of plans. I mean, we're gonna be able to look at a lot of different things. You know, they've got plans from schools all over the country. We'll be able to, you know, get an idea, but we have to define what our needs are first, and then go from there.
Just maybe a couple comments on the debt question, the last one there, so.
Can I finish this?
Yep.
I just, you know, what Corey had said, well, somehow the teachers and staff need to be included in this decision. Right, and put on this, I agree with that 100%. That needs to be done. My other question though would be, how, you know, previously when both school districts would go for bond, they would have, you know, the town halls, you know, 3 or 4 town halls. But if we'd be doing that same thing, and who would be leading that? Would it be the school board or the administration? Because there's always been a lot of debate on who should lead that. I'm just curious what your guys' thoughts are there.
Can I throw an opinion on that? So a couple of the different bonds that I was a part of, one of them, the architects ran the public forums, and they were not successful. Another one, the school board ran it, and they were not successful. Having it a conjoined effort seemed to have the most success. When everybody had a say within how that public forum was being run and the information was being presented, that way it wasn't just the architect, and it wasn't just the school board, it wasn't just the superintendent. It seemed to be more successful, and that's how the high school got done.
I would say collaborative effort for the most part, and I think it's really spearheaded by the superintendent and administration. And if you look at some of the other Class A districts, Minot and Mandan recently that have been successful, that's how they were structured.
Yep, at the bond forums that we had for many years back up until just recent years, when the superintendent was the forefront and then those admins and then the school board's there, but we're not the ones doing the talking. We are there and we're there mingling and we're having conversations. They seem to be more successful, in my opinion, and even data shows that they were more successful because we were able to get some things done when they were done in that manner. But if we're the ones presenting, they don't seem to do as well. When it's just the architects presenting, it doesn't seem to do as well.
My personal opinion on this is I think there does need to be some type of involvement of the school board, whether that be there in person just as a support system, or if there's only one public forum, Kyle, that we're there for. And I understand how Grand Forks and everybody has done this. And I'm completely on board with the admin team taking, the reins on this. But I also think part of our board governance and something that we've offered and kind of told the public is that they'll have some accessibility to us on these items. And as they should, it's a huge ask that the board is asking from the public, not alone, let alone just educators, and I appreciate that the educators are going to be in this building, but we really have to respect the people that have the votes. We only, technically, however many people live in Williston right now, that's still a pretty small percentage of how many people work in our school district. And so we still have to really take care of those other people. And for me, that's a public forum. So, I don't know, Chris, how that would look. I don't know if that's us running it completely, kind of like what Heather's saying, if that hasn't worked in the past. But I do think at some point there has to be some accessibility to us during this process, even if it's one time.
Yeah, I think it's a collaborative effort, certainly, with our attendance, but I don't think we're the lead on it, in my opinion.
I had one last question, and it does reflect to the bond. Because we are reorganized and we're still within the 5 years, how does that affect us with the bond? We need to put out a question first to get the public's permission, since we're gonna be adding buildings? I mean, how is that gonna work with Century Code?
No difference. There's the resolutions that have to be passed by the board to call for the election. That will be worked through bond council, similar to how it's been passed, so.
Okay, the
The
only
board would need
reason,
to authorize it at a public meeting.
okay, yeah, the only reason I ask is because I was looking at some stuff and it's too confusing to understand. And since we're within the 5 year mark, I wanted to make sure that we're not doing anything that we're not supposed to be doing. Other districts that have reorganized, they've put forward the question to the public and then moved forward with bond, doing everything that we're doing right now. And others didn't. And since we're the first one in the state to do what we're doing, I just want to make sure that we're doing everything that we're supposed to be doing per Century Code.
Yep, public ultimately has the final vote and the final say on it.
Yeah.
60% of so.
Talk about that petition language in there.
It's like 15, I was just looking at it the other day, when we had talked about prepping for this meeting, because I wanted to remind myself. It says something about, and I will have to look at it because it's at home, I don't have it in front of me. It's like 15.10, I think, roughly. That when a reorganized district is within the 5 years, they can't follow the normal protocol for a bond. There's stipulations, and those stipulations are public approval. I have to look at it again. I am sorry, I didn't bring the information with me, so I don't have it in front of me. I could look it up. Do you want me to look it up? I mean, everybody can look it up on their own.
Yeah, just pose it to Chris.
Yeah, I would
Yeah,
say any resolution that were to come before the board for consideration would be reviewed by Chris now.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, we can't do
Need
anything
whatever
without,
advice is in regards to the process.
yeah, without her stamp of approval, we can't do anything. That way we know what we want. Just because we're new, this is a whole new thing. Nobody else has done this before. So we're the benchmark for any other district or districts that may want to do this in the future. That was my only question about that.
Anything else on the middle one regarding communication plan at this point before I make a few more comments on the questions on the slide? But I think certainly as we look at the debt limit and ultimately if the decision of the board is 2 schools, which I think clearly based off of the numbers, that's the need. Enrollment will just have to continually be monitored, but it does pose, I think, certainly challenges at the high school level. I mean, I think we're well aware of that. That building is a 1250 capacity building. And they're well over 1,400 up there this year, marching towards probably 1,600, not too far off, 400 a class.
Yeah.
That there's not bonding capacity to go build another high school or a grade center or something like that. So that's definitely going to be something that's going to have to be evaluated. Probably not this board that'll be evaluating that, but certainly in the future that's going to be an issue that has to be tackled. There are some options. Right now we're at the 5% of your assessed value, I think is the limit. You can ask the public to raise that to 10, I think. But that would be a vote for the public at that time to increase that debt to that level.
Maybe I'm off topic here, so if you move all those fifth graders back in elementary schools, now you have that whole, it's called the credit center, build elementary school for junior high. Could that have the potential to be the freshman center? Smile.
And then the numbers.
I kind of chuckle because I had brought that up to Dr. Payton the other day because we know that these students are going to continue to move and the high school is not going to be able to facilitate all of those students. And I did tell Dr. Payton that maybe we want to look at 6, 7, and 8 and we use the central campus for that. So that would bring it to like a freshman center.
So what, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And we could still use the model that we are using currently in regard to Mr. Deskey and helping the freshmen and isolating or helping them grow. And because going to the high school, I'm sure it is pretty overwhelming for some of the freshmen.
Has anyone ever thought, and maybe this is what you guys are referring to, but doing a model like some other states have where it's 6 through 9, 10 through 12, and then that opens the door about what about those 9th graders? They're technically high schoolers, so they should be able to go out for high school sports, or they go on middle school sports. I'm just thinking out loud, posing the question since this is just a question discussion.
I think we're maybe a little bit off topic maybe, because I don't think we're probably discussing a referendum to accomplish that here today. That's probably a conversation certainly that's going to have to be had someday.
Yeah, no, that's
if it's us here.
Yeah, you're right, we are off topic, you're right, yeah. We're talking about elementary. See what you started?
Yeah, I mean, there certainly are other spacing challenges coming down the horizon other than just elementary schools.
So let's go ahead and I changed our screen up here to our next question. And I think we really did discuss this, but feel free to continue is responding to growth. And if we look at page 7 of the long-term facilities planning report, and if you want me to read it, I surely can, but in the orange, that's what it states. And the question is basically goes back to, do we need one building or do we need 2 buildings? And our growth will definitely fluctuate and we definitely have to keep close tabs on it. So,
And I think honestly, based off of this language, we'd be planning for a 3rd. The day the door is open on the 2nd.
Yeah.
Any questions or comments?
Is the idea to, as we're going through this process, and then we're looking at possibly 2 more meetings of this nature, is the idea to come out of each meeting with a little bit of a more solid, firm consensus of where the board is at for us to begin to fill this plan and start heading that way? Today, if we walk out of here in a consensus of, I think most of us are looking at, this is a two-school situation, not a one-school situation. So will that then develop for you guys a route coming from the district office to say, this is what we're kind of looking at recommending to the board as we go through this?
Yes, I think the goal is to try to get some consensus on certain items. Certainly understand that board members may need additional information on certain aspects to firm up other decisions that have to be made, but I think today I'm carrying a lot of consensus already that 2 is the need in terms of elementary schools. What the specifics look like in terms of design, budget, 1 gym, 2 gym, those are finer details that will flesh them out over the course of the next couple of meetings, but some of the higher level, bigger picture that will trickle down into those finer details, I think is kind of the goal here today. Okay.
Makes sense.
Okay, understanding terminology. And this will be very important for our next slide. Ideal capacity. Ideal capacity is the classroom capacity that does not include the capacity of the portable / modulars on the school site. This is the capacity of the brick and mortar of the school. Capacity as used. Capacity as used is the current enrollment for the specific school. And that will make a lot of sense when we go on to this next slide. There we go. So if we're looking at our K-4 elementaries here, we do have Missouri Ridge, which is K-5. You can see the capacity that we have, that capacity we're using right now, like at Garden Valley, we have 129 students out there. And for ideal capacity is 75. So if you want to scan those and generate any questions you may have. And as you're looking, I'll just make a comment on the Missouri Ridge capacity. We're currently at 350. If we did not have that available to us, our classrooms, I would be safe to say that we'd be in the high 20s, maybe some in the 30s. Because you look at Hagen, they're right now at 464 students. Last year, I would say that we were at points in time in the 550s. So you can definitely, it lessened students, which is advantageous for the kids' academic prowess.
I remember when my girls first started going to school here, they went to Hagen. And the capacity was pushing that 400 mark, right? In 2010. Yes. Then when they transferred to McVeigh, the whole 5 years that they were at McVeigh, we were over 500 students in that building every year, sometimes pushing 550. And you guys were just there. Well, we all were just there for that board meeting. So imagine trying to cram 550 kids in that building in all those boardrooms.
And just to add off of that, keep in mind that they have 1 gym.
Yep.
And that gym is used for a commons area too. And the scheduling of activities for that is just a nightmare.
And at the time, McVeigh was K through 6. And that's when my girls were there.
I feel like we're spending a lot of time trying to justify the building of 2 new schools by talking about how bad the modulars are. I think we all know how bad they are.
True.
I don't think there's any need to justify. And again, it's not about building a building. I don't think our community wants to spend money to build a building, but I think they'll spend money to give a better educational opportunity to our kids. So part of that is how we sell it, how we word it, and that's the reality of it, is to give a better education for our students. It's not about buying bricks and paint, so there's no doubt in modulars, of course, Chris and I just saw it was McVeigh, and they're the new schools.
And with a reduced number of students, that means that those students get a little more individual attention. There's more teachers to go around and help out.
And I think getting back to kind of, the phase out discussion, in looking at the first two schools that we visited, Lewiston Park and McVeigh this year, I know both principals had made the comment that if you were to get rid of all of the modulars, you're basically down to a one section elementary school at that point. And is that feasible to operate? Probably not. That's another reason I don't think that all of the modulars are going away anytime soon. There's gonna have to be some of them that are repaired or fixed or.
Well, when we have the new buildings built, when that time does come, some of those older modulars that are in extreme need of the junkyard, they could be replaced by existing modulars within our district, right? Potentially.
Potentially, you'd have to weigh the costs on that. I know that the discussion occurred at, I think, Building and Grounds related to Wilkinson and looking at moving some of our newer ones over there and possibly some pretty significant.
I would say $120,000.
Okay.
Potentially spend. Yeah.
Well, maybe all these other companies that we have in town might be willing to give us a discount if they, I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud again.
It's definitely something that's gonna have to be looked at because there's gonna be a certain percentage of them that stay for some period of time.
Easier for us to answer the questions posed. If we answer the question, given our current situation, given our options, given where we're at, given all the data and all the information we have, what would be the wise thing to do? Not the right thing. What would be the wise thing to do? Forbid the lightning struck portables and burned down all of our portables tonight because lightning struck them. What are we going to do? I mean, this is not an emotional decision. This is a wise decision. So when you make a wise decision, it takes the emotion out of the decision. So we just need to make a wise decision for our students. So, this seems common sense.
Back to what you said, what Mr. Wall said about how is this going to improve the education of our students. That's one thing that Dr. Chavez talked about before he sat in that long-range facilities planning is you really need to focus on what you're going to do in those buildings, what you want to do with those students in those buildings. And I think it goes back to what Corey said, where we need to be getting input from the teachers. One of my big questions is like very rich, we talk about professional learning communities, but that building work for professional learning communities? Is there space to do that? Those are questions I have. And I guess I just want to see how the staff and teachers are included in this process. I don't want to be having those conversations, but I want the administration to show me this is how we included them in this process and solicit their feedback.
Yeah.
And per our new governance policies, guys, it requires input from the staff and community, that's built into those governance policies. So, I'm with you guys on making sure we get all input and that it's given to us before we do any type of formal motion. My biggest thing is that we're not going to get any smaller as a community. Even if we just stopped growing for even a few years, we're still busting at the seams at what we have now. And, I completely understand being wise and not being emotional and all that. But these are things that this community has been talking about back when I was campaigning. This was one of my campaign things, was talking about modulars. And it wasn't to come in and be a superhero and, get all these things done in a short amount of time, but it is to have the conversations and to have the hard conversations that talk about the things that make a big difference. And again, this community is not getting smaller. And that's one of the biggest things that I think we need to focus on is, yes, the renderings and making sure that we're not spending extra money. Cause I agree. I think some of the rendering I saw, there's a lot of extra stuff that I'm like, could that be an extra classroom? Could that be this? But we also have to really focus on that there's growth here and there's been continuous growth here. And we have to get the public on board that that's not going to change. And if it's not their kid being affected, it might be their grandkid in 10 years. Somebody's going to be affected that they know. And that's where I want to stay the most focused with the community is, again, it's kind of like what Mr. Wallstead saying, we don't need to be emotional about it, but you don't have to be emotional, be factual. And sometimes factual things get people emotional, and that's okay because being emotional and being factual is actually really effective in this community. So that's my main thing is just staying very factual throughout the process and staying focused on why we're doing it, which like you're saying, Kyle, it's a strategic plan. And I know Corey's talked about that, but it's also to give our educators the space and the students, the educational experience. So that's the main thing I'd like to stay focused on.
When I was a youth pastor years ago, we would do fifth quarters after football game. We lived right across the street from the football field at the time. And we lived in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. And there were Friday nights I had 75 kids in my house. Could it fit 75 kids? Yeah. Do I want to live with 75 kids? No. So, when we talk about portables and our community saying, well, we've got plenty of room, whatever the case is, yeah, I can fit 75 people in my 3-bedroom house. I don't want them there all the time. So, it's just logical to me that we need to expand.
Again, I think we have to find out what our needs are, not necessarily our wants, and how we are going to phase out, our portables. And how can we start to do that? And we have to start it. We're not going to be able to do it all at one time, but we have to show how we can do that. And we got to figure out first what our needs are, not necessarily our wants, but what our needs are, and then start filling in the blanks and what are the most, pressing needs right now, and do those first. But we need direction from our, administration and our teachers on what those needs are. If we're going to build 2 schools, what we need in those schools, what, not necessarily our wants, but what our absolute needs are. And then go from there to our portables and what can we do with them? Where do we start with them? How do we phase some of that out? And we need to know those questions before we can answer anything, say we can get rid of this portable or that portable. We need some direction too.
Good point. I would agree with what John said. I think we need to be specific, like the board, the public. And then if you guys vote for this, we're going to remove 2 from Wilkinson and 2 from Lewis and Clark or whatever it is. That's just an example. And we're putting the 5th graders back in elementary schools. I think we need to be very specific on what we're going to actually do.
Yeah, the people have to see the end goal before they buy in. They've got to see how this is going to positively affect my student before we get buy-in from them.
Yep, absolutely.
It's got to be personal.
How's everybody doing? Do you need to have a break?
Yeah, I need to go get a snack. My stomach is growling. I didn't get dinner before I came.
Okay, let's take a quick 5-minute break and then we'll try to move through the rest of this and get everybody out of here by 7:30.
Oh.
Amy. We had a question earlier in regards to, I believe, Mrs. Wheeler had asked in regards to the state of our modulars and what years they were built. You can look up on the screen or read over our presentation, give you specific dates and specific dates for the additions and remodels.
Kind of exhausted the modular discussion here, so we'll just let everybody take a look at that. And there's some pictures of some of them attached in the presentation, so unless anybody has any specific questions would like Mr. Clausen to try and address it, we'll move on to the next one here.
Part of the game. Okay, with that in mind, let's take a look at our next slide. We're talking about main factors for consideration when we're looking at construction. And we have to talk, think about the subcontractor availability, the time, you're dealing with your inflation, and then your operation and staffing of the school, which we previously talked about. And once again, those modulars sneak up again, the decommissioning of those modulars. What are the best avenues for that? Okay, assuming that the two projects will be the same footprint, I think that will be definitely advantageous. Recommend that we would bid both of them at the same time. And we can do a hold schedule for one of the schools with a hard opening date aligning with the start of the school, one school. And allow some flexibility for the second school to be completed 6 to 12 months behind the first. And I'll let you, I don't want to insult you by reading them to you. So if you have any questions.
Remember any questions from Mr. Clausen on this one? This seems to make a lot of sense to me. I think we're all well aware there's significant trade shortages and contractors and things like that, and trying to widen that out a little bit and maybe move them from the first project to the second project with a little bit lag on that second one seems to make a lot of sense to me.
We'll garner a lot of interest in that, doing it that way.
Okay, staff recruitment plan. And if I'm going too fast, let me know. And as, you know, we kind of talked about this previously. Recruitment is huge. And I think we hired a new PR person about 2 weeks ago, Paula Langford. And I think she has done a wonderful job so far. And I think that she'll be able to get us to advertise our needs on different platforms that we're probably not aware of. Once again, I believe UMary is working with Williston State, so we can maybe grow our own here in Williston, which would be awesome. So that is staff recruitment and retention is two very huge items that we deal with on a day-to-day basis.
I asked Mr. Ratzak, when recruiting teachers, is a new facility, does that have a bearing, you think, in your opinion?
Oh, I think anybody would want to teach in a new building.
Okay,
Um,
I mean, that's would help.
Because you could, you know, I guess to me, if you're gonna be a teacher, you're gonna wanna teach anywhere. You know, for your first job, you wanna not be picky. But, you know, if you get an opportunity to go to a new school, start your career at a new place, that would be kind of enticing to me. I thought when I got my job, I'd be working at Rickard, I thought that was Hagen. Then I found out it was the new school in the district, that was Hagen, and it was like, that was really exciting to me, because I was like, oh, at least I can do a little bit more, you know? So something like that's kind of, it's exciting.
So that just helps in the process of
I think it would.
I think a past bond in a District 2 creates a lot of excitement for individuals wanting to come into the area or thinking about it, right? Because then you see the community's bought into the goals and the plans of the district, so that kind of creates a little bit more interest, do you think?
Well, I think it's a working conditions, you know, we talk about salary, we talk about working conditions when we're negotiating with the union, and there's not such great working conditions in some of these buildings. I mean, let's just be honest, whether it's rooms that don't have air conditioning, portables that aren't holding the heat real well, and if it's 30 below zero, your classroom might be 55 or 60 degrees. So I firmly believe absolutely it would help in terms of.
I do think young teachers would.
And I think something for every school, it might be important too, that we do something at every school, you know, whether it be little or big. I think doing something at every one of those schools will be important, I think.
Okay, once again, we have decommissioned portables, we have beat that one to death, so we're just gonna move right on. Unless anybody wants to add something else. Okay, let's take a look at the potential schedule. If you wanna go ahead and take a look at those and generate questions that you may have.
I'll just add on the first one there, we've looked at kind of the timeline in prior meetings, I think, but it's just maybe a good refresher. If the board's goal is to hold a potential election or vote prior to the end of the year, you're looking probably at the latest one of those meetings in October. It's 64 days, I believe, after the board has authorized the resolutions as to when the election is held, so.
Anybody got an opinion on, I mean, is that a pretty aggressive timeline? I'm just wondering if we need, I mean, we've been talking about this amongst ourselves for so long. And we've leaked it into the community, but do you think the community is prepared to make that decision? I mean, this is pretty aggressive, I think, to vote on it yet this year.
I would like to say, I think the community has, through the past few votes, shown that they're ready for moving forward in their selection of board members, and that they don't feel like we've been moving too fast in the timeline. I think they feel like we've been running on a full head of steam that's been akin to what they want to see happen now. From their votes have been very clear on their board members. So I think these are things that we've talked about for years. We've run bonds for years. They know what we need, and now it's presenting what we want to them, not so much as a time frame of building a whole new plan, because we're not doing that. We're not starting on a foundational piece. We're taking what we've built for years and going to make it fit District 7 and then going to present it to them. So I think the timeline looks good. I think getting something done before the end of 23 would be a great start, because once again, the farther you push out, the more increase it's going to cost them to get, the less we're going to get out of these schools. So the farther we keep pushing, you're going to keep seeing quarterly increases in cost to build.
I don't disagree with anything you say. I just want to make sure we have buy-in from the community so that they're not shocked when it comes to this referendum respond.
I believe anybody that would be shocked by that would definitely not be paying attention to the school district. I don't know how you'd be shocked or surprised that we need schools or that we were coming with a bond.
I'd say the conversations I have with people in the community, they're kind of like, what's taking you guys so long? Is more what kind of the feedback I get. My only concern is we have a design, but they're gonna have to be altered a little bit, what everyone using. Is this enough time to get that done, is my question. Just waiting. At what point would we have to decide on
I
that?
agree with Mr. Swens. You know, I think people know we're coming for a bond.
I think the community wants to know a couple of things. One, where they're gonna be at, the locations. Two, how many students it's going to fit. And three, big picture generally what it's gonna look like. I think if there's some tweaks and modifications that have to be made, you know, moving some things here, moving some things there, I don't think is vital for the public engagement piece. It would be preferred if it's ironclad, this is what it looks like. But I think what's really important is that we stay on a schedule that would allow, if the community supports it, to get construction going spring of next year and hopefully get, the building open fall of 25, is that, if I'm reading that right? Yeah, August of 25, because we have spacing issues now. And I've heard similar comments to what Mr. Brenner has said. I think there's a lot of people wondering why it's taken us this long to get here. But I think this board has been mindful and really trying to do the research to get this absolutely right. So we do get the community support and buy-in that we need to make this successful. So I think the next workshop is probably important for us to get JLG, EATC, FCI, and JE done. Offer that invitation to all of them to come here. I think a lot of the questions that I'm writing down relate to architect design, cost, budget, things like that. So I think that should probably be the focus of the next workshop, would be a presentation from those folks and then a Q&A with the board on that.
And there's a fourth one too, from your list of your three that you said who's gonna go there. That's always on parents' minds. If they've got an elementary age student, is my kid gonna be able to go to the new school or not? That, they always ask. Does it affect their vote? Not necessarily, but they wanna know.
And I think it goes back to what Mr. Kasner said earlier, maybe speaking to the existing schools, because even if my student is not in one of the brand new public schools, how will this move, building these two new schools, positively impact my student who's still in one of the existing ones?
Exactly, bingo. Yep. That way, everyone has the potential to have buy-in. Oh, there's gonna be less students in my building, which is going to offer these additional opportunities.
I think we've started some of that already, with what we've been doing this summer. Prior to the school year, we started putting money into those schools. So we working on putting in secure vestibules. Like there's things that have been actively happening this year to those buildings that's going to continue moving forward. And that's the great thing with our superintendent that's spearheading, making sure that those things are happening. So I think that's been a really good thing for us. We've got nice stuff going in over here. So it is not just we are doing things to impact those students already.
Yep, I agree.
That's the truth, and we need our communications director to be putting that out there, that we've already started on building, we've already started on doing things. We need that out there.
Agreed.
Okay, let's move on to our next one. Projected costs. And I think that goes back to, I believe, Mr. Walsted that talked about what is in our budget. How do we make these things fit our budget? So is there any, kind of talked about that quite a bit already? About making sure if this is approved, that we fit these plans into our budget moving forward.
And I think this is one of the pieces for the next meeting too, is to ask both JLG and the NBC to update any estimates that they might have. These are strictly estimates, obviously, based off of what they're kind of seeing in the marketplace on projects on a per square foot basis. But just looking at the document, you know, I see some savings already.
Quick question. On the agenda, didn't we have an executive session to talk about this type of stuff?
That is related to potential sites, just the
Oh,
sites.
okay. I'm sorry. I thought we were still live streamed. I just wanted to make sure. I apologize. Okay, go ahead.
But I think there's some savings, obviously, just looking at their document, what they've got listed for site cost relative to what we are under contract for on the Hagen property. So that I think that's going to be a significant reduction to their estimates right there, which is a positive. But if everybody's okay, I think we'll have Dr. Bailey and his team work with those folks and bring some of that information back for the next workshop, and we can flesh that out a little bit further if everybody's good with that.
No sense in talking numbers until we understand what we're talking.
With the interest rates the way they are, they're not gonna change, that much that quick. We're gonna be able to find more workers because there's not gonna be as much done in the country as there has been in the past. So I think we're doing things at the right time.
Okay, ready? Go ahead, Ms. Williams.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, yeah, just to finalize this, I think this is the right time too. I mean, I feel like we've done the legwork. I feel like we've done the, planting the seeds in the community, doing the surveys throughout the years to get to this point. So, I agree with Mr. Swint. I feel like the momentum is here. I think the facts are here. The numbers are here. Obviously, we need to get other numbers, attached to what we're asking, but it is only going to get more students and it's only going to get more expensive. So I'm okay with the timeline as presented.
All right, I'll open it up to the board. Any additional questions or comments that you have for Mr. Clausen at this time before we take executive sessions?
So last, what is geotechnical boring?
We'll discuss that next regarding some of the negotiations.
Okay, because I'm looking at it and trying to figure out what that word means, and I apologize if I don't know what it means.
Okay, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Kevin.
You are sure welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
All right, so the next item on the agenda here is the executive session. This item may be discussed in executive session. The legal authority for closing this portion of the meeting is North Dakota Century Code Section 44-04-19.1 of Section 9 to discuss negotiating strategy related to potential land acquisition for future schools. The executive session to discuss negotiating strategy is necessary because holding such discussion in an open meeting would have an adverse fiscal effect on the bargaining position of the Williston Basin School District Number 7. Williston Basin School District Number 7 School Board is conducting an executive session to discuss negotiating strategy. At this time, a motion would be in order to conduct this discussion in executive session rather than in an open meeting. Is there such a motion? So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Ashley, go ahead and call the roll, please.
Williams,
Aye.
Wheeler,
Aye.
Swint,
Aye.
Hasmer, Renner,
Aye.
Olstad,
Yes.
Judd.
Aye, motion carries. The executive session will be recorded. All members of the governing body are reminded to limit their discussion during the executive session to the announced topic. Any collective decision, collective commitment, or other final action by the governing body must occur after it reconvenes in an open meeting unless final action is specifically required by law to be taken during the executive session. We will now ask members of the public who are attending